Michael Jordan found a letter from a fan in his locker. 20 years later, he finally replied. The locker room was buzzing. Game 6. Chicago Bulls vs. Utah Jazz. June 14, 1998. The air was thick with tension and anticipation. Jordan sat quietly at his locker, headphones in, head down. All around him, trainers moved, teammates talked, and cameras flashed. It was possibly the last dance, though no one said it out loud. Somewhere behind the scenes, a skinny 13-year-old kid named Danny Carter clutched a wrinkled envelope. His hands were shaking. He wasn't supposed to be here. He wasn't a ball boy, not part of any tour. But after sneaking in with his uncle, a part-time cleaner, he found himself behind the red and black curtain where legends sat. Danny had written the letter the night before. 4 pages, handwritten. Not perfect. Words scratched out. Smudged ink in some places. But it was honest. He wrote about his dad, how they used to watch every Bulls game together until cancer took him 2 years ago. He wrote about how, since then, basketball was all he had. And how Jordan, his moves, his poise, the fire in his eyes, kept Danny going when everything else felt like it was slipping. He ended the letter with a bold request. If you can, I have a middle school championship game next Friday at Lincoln Park Middle. I'll be number 23. Like you. I'd give anything for you to come watch. But even if you can't, thanks for being my hero. Now, here he was, holding that letter like it was a ticket to something bigger than himself. Hey, he whispered to a passing ball boy. Please, could you put this in Michael Jordan's locker? The kid raised a brow, looked down at the envelope. Danny had written to Michael Jordan. From Danny C. in blue pen. Sure, kid, he said, stuffing it into a pile of fan mail near Jordan's bench. Danny gave a small smile, turned, and disappeared down the hallway. Minutes later, Jordan walked in, nodding at his teammates. He didn't see the envelope. Didn't know that just behind his gym bag, between a Gatorade bottle and a spare pair of socks, sat a letter that would remain unopened for over 2 decades. The game came and went. Jordan's final shot sealed the title. Cameras captured every second. Confetti rained down. Reporters swarmed. Champagne bottles popped. In the mayhem, Jordan packed his things and walked out a champion. The letter remained behind, kicked into the shadows beneath the bench. A week later, Danny sat on the bench of his own court, jersey on, number 23 printed in fading black on red. He kept looking at the bleachers. Every time the gym doors creaked open, his heart jumped. But Jordan never came. His team won that night, but Danny barely played. The coach said his head wasn't in the game. He was right. Danny felt like he'd gambled everything on a moment that never arrived. After the game, he tucked his jersey in a box, alongside a picture of him and his dad. He didn't play organized ball again. Years passed. He stopped watching games. College came and went. He got a job fixing air conditioners. Then shelves. Then appliances. Then people's roofs. Time rolled forward, dull and quick. He never told anyone about the letter. Not his mom, not his friends, not even his son, born 10 years later to a woman who left 2 summers after. Meanwhile, back in Chicago, the Bulls' locker room was renovated, demolished, rebuilt. But somewhere in a storage unit tagged Jordan-era memorabilia, a dusty equipment bag sat sealed. Inside it, towels, an old wristband, and the letter. And then, in 2020, a young intern named Marco was sorting items for a documentary. He opened the bag and found the envelope, yellowed but intact. He walked over to his supervisor. Hey, this says to Michael Jordan. It's unopened. The man laughed. Probably another kid asking for shoes. But Marco didn't toss it. He placed it in a manila folder and later handed it to the documentary director. 3 weeks later, it made its way to Jordan's private office in Charlotte. Jordan stared at it for a long time before opening it. He had read thousands of fan letters over the years. Most were similar. Gratitude, praise, maybe a quick story, or a shoe request. But this one was different. He read it twice. Then again. He didn't speak. He just sat back in his chair and ran a hand across his face. He remembered that finals night. The chaos. The noise. How his mind was locked on one thing, winning. He didn't remember a letter. But now, sitting there decades later, he realized what that night might have cost someone else. He whispered the name, Danny C. He stood up and looked out the window of his office. Rain tapped against the glass. Jordan had been called a hero so many times in his life, but now he wondered how many kids he unknowingly left behind. He walked over to his memorabilia shelf, picked up a framed shot of that final jumper over Russell. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he opened a drawer and pulled out a pen. Back in the suburbs, Danny wiped oil from his hands and stepped into his small living room. His son was watching old highlights, Jordan's 1998 finals game. "You ever watch this one, Dad?" the kid asked. Danny gave a slight smile. "Yeah. Once or twice." He sat down on the worn-out couch, arms crossed, as the shot replayed in slow motion. Jordan. Fadeaway. Nothing but net. Danny stared at the screen. He never hated him. Not even back then. But he never forgot that silence either. And far away, in a different city, Jordan sealed the letter back in its envelope, now with a note of his own inside. He stared at it before writing an address on the front. This time, it wasn't going to get lost. This time, he was going to show up. The envelope arrived in Danny Carter's mailbox on a rainy Wednesday afternoon. It was thicker than usual mail. A red wax seal on the back. The front had his name written neatly, not typed, with no return address. His son, Jalen, grabbed it and tossed it onto the kitchen counter like it was junk. Danny picked it up, flipped it over, and paused. Something about the handwriting was oddly clean. Familiar, even. He cracked the seal. Inside were two things, a signed Bulls jersey with the number 23, and a folded handwritten letter on crisp white paper. Danny. I just read your letter. 22 years too late, I know. But it found me. And I read every word. I don't know how I missed it back then. I can't go back. But I want to say something now. If you're open to it, I'd like to meet. MJ. Danny sat down. The room seemed to pause. Rain pattered against the window. He read the note again. Then again. Still unsure if it was real. He opened the second folded paper tucked behind the letter, a plane ticket to Chicago. First class. Departure, Friday. Jalen came back into the kitchen with a juice box. Dad, you good? Danny didn't answer right away. He wasn't good. He was confused, overwhelmed, suspicious. But buried underneath all that was something he hadn't felt in years, hope. That Friday, Danny stepped onto a plane for the first time in over a decade. He wore his old Lincoln Park middle jacket, faded and patched at the elbows. A stewardess smiled and offered champagne. He declined. Landing in Chicago stirred something in him. The skyline still felt like home, even after he'd moved away. A driver with a sign reading Carter waited near baggage claim and took him straight to the United Center. No media. No press. Just a quiet side entrance and an escort through empty hallways filled with banners and echoes. He was brought to a room that looked like a conference lounge. Hardwood floors. Old Bulls photos framed on the wall. A basketball on a pedestal in the corner. Danny stood awkwardly, unsure of what to do with his hands. Then, the door opened. Michael Jordan walked in wearing a black jacket and jeans. He looked older than Danny remembered, but also exactly the same. Still carried the same calm intensity. "Danny?" he asked. Danny nodded, standing up straighter. Jordan walked over, extended his hand. Danny shook it, unsure what to say. You really got my letter, Danny said finally. Jordan smiled. Took me 2 decades, but yeah, I got it. They sat across from each other at a wooden table. No cameras. No agents. Just 2 men with 20 years of silence between them. Jordan leaned forward. I read it 3 times. You wrote about your dad. About how you and he watched the games together. Danny nodded slowly. He passed in '96. Writing to you felt like, I don't know, like writing to both of you. Jordan was quiet for a moment. I get a lot of letters. Most I don't even see. But this one, it hit different. Danny shrugged. I didn't expect anything back. I just hoped. I saw you wrote about your game, Jordan said. Lincoln Park. Friday night. Number 23. Danny gave a faint smile. I waited. You never came. Jordan looked down. Yeah. I don't know what I was doing that Friday, but I know what I missed. There was a pause. I quit playing not long after, Danny said. It stopped feeling worth it. That letter, it was my shot. Jordan looked at him seriously. And I missed it. Danny didn't respond. The silence was thick, but not hostile. I wanted to apologize face to face, Jordan continued. That's not something I say often. Danny finally exhaled. You didn't owe me anything. But, yeah, it mattered. Jordan reached into a bag he'd brought. Pulled out a small red and black box. I brought something. Thought maybe you'd like it. Danny opened the box. Inside, an original Wilson game ball from the '98 finals. Signed in black marker. Below the signature, sorry I missed your game. Danny swallowed hard. Thank you, he said, voice cracking just slightly. They talked for another hour. About basketball. Life. Regret. Parenting. Jordan asked about Jalen. Danny talked about raising him solo. Working hardware jobs. Watching from the sidelines while his son started to love the game on his own. You ever coach? Jordan asked. Danny shook his head. Didn't think I had anything left to give it. Jordan nodded thoughtfully. That's where you're wrong. They walked the halls of the stadium together. Empty rows. Retired jerseys hanging like ghosts above. Then Jordan turned to him and said, There's a youth camp I fund every summer. Real quiet. Not a media circus. Just kids in the game. I want you there. Danny blinked. You serious? Completely. You've got something to give. Probably more than most of the people I've paid to be there. Danny thought about it. I don't have a degree. No coaching badge. You've got heart. You've got pain. And you've got experience. Kids don't need lectures. They need someone who's been through it. Danny didn't say yes right away. He needed time to breathe, to believe this was real. But before they parted ways, Jordan gave him a hug, not the kind you give a stranger. The kind you give someone whose pain you finally understand. Thanks for writing me, he said. Thanks for answering, Danny replied. That night, Danny walked out of the stadium with the ball under one arm, the jersey in his bag, and something he hadn't carried in years, closure. Back at his hotel, he video called Jalen. You'll never guess who I talked to today. Who? Danny turned the phone camera toward the autographed ball. Jalen's mouth dropped open. No way. Danny smiled. Yeah. And he invited us to something. Jalen's eyes lit up. Wait, us? Danny paused. If I go, I'm bringing you with me. As the screen flickered and Jalen asked a dozen questions, Danny leaned back against the headboard. For the first time in years, he felt seen. And he wasn't done with the game just yet. 3 months later, Danny Carter stood on the sidelines of a gym in North Carolina, clipboard in hand, whistle hanging from his neck. His son, Jalen, was running drills with a group of 10 kids, all wearing red and black jerseys. A big white banner above the court read, Jordan Legacy Youth Camp. Danny still couldn't quite believe he was here. The first week had been rough. He hadn't coached in years, had never really coached, to be honest. But the camp staff welcomed him. The kids listened. And Jordan had been right, they didn't need a perfect coach. They needed someone who understood what it felt like to lose something and still show up. Jalen had fit in right away, already making friends and impressing with his jump shot. One of the other dads joked he had Jordan blood after watching the kid sink 4 threes in a row. Jordan hadn't shown up every day, but when he did, he'd pull Danny aside to check in. No cameras. No ceremony. Just quick chats, a nod of respect, a shared look that said, "We're good." The camp was winding down now. The final day meant scrimmages, awards, and tearful goodbyes. Danny blew the whistle. Switch. Kids rotated positions. Jalen jogged over, sweat on his brow, grinning. "You're pushing us harder than Coach Miller back home," he said. "Because I see more in you than Coach Miller does," Danny replied, tapping him on the chest with the clipboard. "Go run it again." Jalen nodded and sprinted off. From the entrance of the gym, Jordan stepped in quietly, wearing a plain cap and sunglasses. A few of the parents noticed but kept their distance. The man had a presence that didn't need an introduction. Danny spotted him and nodded. Jordan gave him a subtle thumbs up. After the scrimmage, the kids gathered at center court. Danny handed out small awards, most hustle, best teammate, sharpest handles. Each one got a round of applause. He saved Jalen for last. "And finally," Danny said, trying to keep his voice even, "this kid surprised me more than anyone. Not because of how he played, but how he led." He handed Jalen a certificate and gave him a side hug. Jalen smiled, a little embarrassed but clearly proud. Later that afternoon, as the gym emptied, Jordan approached Danny while he packed up cones and stray basketballs. "You're good at this," Jordan said. Danny looked up. "You think?" "I know. The kids respond to you. Even the quiet ones." Danny leaned against the table. "Never saw myself doing this. Thought maybe that chapter was closed." "It wasn't," Jordan said. "Some stories just take longer to get to the right part." Danny chuckled. "You always talk like that?" "Only when I'm trying to make a point." They both laughed. It felt natural now, like old teammates catching up, even if they had only really shared a couple hours in person. Jordan grew quiet. "I've spent most of my life thinking about legacy. About what people will remember." Danny nodded slowly. "Winning. Records. All that." Jordan shrugged. "It matters. But it's not everything. This camp? These kids? That's what lasts. Not the banners. Not the trophies." Danny looked around the empty court. "I get that now." Jordan turned to leave, then paused. "You ever want to do this full time, say the word. I'll make some calls. Might be time the next generation learns from guys like you." Danny smiled. "Thanks, Mike." "Really?" "No," Jordan said. "Thank you for writing that letter. Even if it took me 20 years to read it." They shook hands one last time. It wasn't just about the camp. It was about closure. Respect. Full circle. As Jordan left, Jalen came over with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. "Is it really over?" he asked. "For now," Danny replied. "But not forever." They walked toward the exit together, the sun lowering outside the tall glass windows. "So what now?" Jalen asked. "I was thinking," Danny said, "we could start something back home. A little weekend league. Nothing big. Just a place for kids to play. No pressure. Just love for the game." Jalen lit up. "Can I help run it?" Only if you're okay running laps when you're late. They both laughed. At the airport the next morning, Danny sat at the gate while Jalen got snacks. He took out the envelope Jordan had given him the night before. Inside was a typed letter this time. Short and simple. Danny, you gave up on the game for a while. I get that. But I'm glad you found your way back. Kids need coaches like you. People who care. People who remember what it felt like to be overlooked. You reminded me of why I fell in love with this game in the first place. Stay in it. The next letter a kid writes, make sure you're there to answer. MJ. Danny folded the letter and slipped it back into his bag. He looked out the window at the tarmac. 20 years ago, he was just a kid with a pen, trying to reach his hero. Now, he wasn't chasing heroes anymore. He was becoming one, for his son, and maybe for a few kids who needed someone to show up. The flight boarded. He stood, stretched, and picked up his bag. As they walked down the tunnel toward the plane, Jalen said, I told my friends at school you met Jordan. They didn't believe me. Danny smiled. Good. Let them keep guessing. They found their seats. Jalen dozed off before takeoff. Danny sat back, closed his eyes, and breathed. Some stories end with a buzzer beater. Others end with a letter finally answered. But the best ones? They don't really end at all. They just pass the ball forward.